Senator Ted Cruz recently met with new diplomatic representatives from the Venezuelan opposition. He's also pushing a creative solution to the border barrier funding conundrum. Senator Cruz, a Republican member of the Foreign Relations Committee from Texas, joins us now. Great to have you with us.
Shannon, always good to be with you.
Okay, so let's start talking about the situation in Venezuela. I want to put up a tweet from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She tweeted this a few weeks back. She says a U.S.-backed coup in Venezuela is not a solution to the dire issues they face. Trump's efforts to install a far-right opposition will not only incite violence and further destabilize the region, we must support Mexico, Uruguay, and the Vatican's efforts to facilitate a peaceful dialogue. Your response?
Well, you know, we're seeing in the Democratic Party, they're just galloping to the left. You know, we saw at the State of the Union last week where half the Democrats refused to even say we wouldn't become a socialist country. And this is part and parcel with the same thing. There has always been the extreme voices in the Democratic Party that defend communist dictatorships, that stand with the enemies of America. And sadly, that's what we're seeing here. Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez before him are enemies of America. They oppress their people. Maduro is illegitimate. He is seizing power. You want to talk about a coup? Maduro is using military force to stay in office, and he is not the legitimately elected leader of Venezuela. Juan Guaido is instead. And so the president is quite right, as have most of the nations in the community of civilized nations have recognized Juan Guaido as the legitimately elected leader of Venezuela. And the leftists in the Democratic Party need to stop siding with the communists against the United States of America. That's not good for our country.
Another Democrat over on the House side, Congressman Ro Khanna, says this: Mr. Guaido, you can proclaim yourself leader of Venezuela, but you don't get to authorize U.S. military interventions. Only the U.S. Congress can do that, and we will not. The president has said everything is on the table. Where do we go from here?
Well, listen, it depends what happens. So, for example, we have U.S. diplomatic personnel in Venezuela. Maduro has threatened their safety. I can tell you this: if Maduro did anything to jeopardize the safety of Americans, to jeopardize the safety of American diplomats, then the president would be totally justified in going in and using military force to keep Americans safe. That being said, nobody is talking about military intervention absent aggressive violence against Americans. What we are talking about is recognizing that the rule of law matters. You know, right now, do you know how many generals there are in Venezuela? There are over 3,000 generals.
Wow.
It's an incredible, and they're largely disparate. And right now, the big question is where are the generals going to line up? And what I publicly called on the generals to do is I've said, look, you're facing a choice. Do you stand with Maduro, the tyrant who is on his way out, who is losing power? Or do you stand with the people of Venezuela? Do you stand with the Constitution? Do you stand with the legitimately elected leadership? And one of the things that President Guaido's government has promised to do is to hold free and fair elections, to let the people of Venezuela have a choice. But the choice shouldn't be a leftist communist strongman who is murdering the people, who is torturing the people, who's oppressing the people. And by the way, for all those Democrats who are big fans of socialism, well, you can see where the Green New Deal ends up. It ends up in Venezuela, once one of the most prosperous countries in Latin America, and now people literally starving in the streets.
And they've got resources. Like
abundant.
Yes, they do. Okay, I want to ask you about this new piece of legislation. It's called the El CHAPO Act. Here is what President Trump says about it.
Well, it's always interesting. Anything Ted does is interesting. So that's certainly an interesting one.
He does find you interesting, and he did on the campaign trail as well. But this is about taking money from people like El Chapo who are convicted and using the money that prosecutors are able to seize and then funneling the money to border. Is it security or the wall specifically?
So both.
Will you get 60 votes for that?
Well, we need to find out. We need to take it up and vote on it. And I'll tell you the origins of this idea. It was a number of months ago when we were starting to really vigorously debate the border wall. And Democrats were going on saying that it was too expensive, that they didn't want to spend money on it. Now, set aside for a minute, Shannon, this may be the first time in the history of mankind Democrats thought any government spending program was too expensive. They're willing to throw money down a rat hole every day behind idiotic programs. But let's take it at face value. So okay, let's assume they're telling the truth and they're concerned about the expense. Well, I happened to be reading at the time that the estimates to build a robust wall at the time were between $14 and $20 billion. At the same time, I read that the Department of Justice estimates of the global worth of El Chapo's criminal network worldwide were roughly $14 billion. And there's a natural and elegant symmetry that suggested itself. So I filed the El Chapo Act, which says that all money criminally forfeited from El Chapo and from any other drug lord shall be used for border security and to build the wall. And that means we could do this without spending even a penny of taxpayer money. But not only that, there's a justice to it. You know, those billions that El Chapo has were made trafficking illegally across the U.S. border, bringing narcotics across the border, and it is only right that those ill-gotten gains go to fixing the problems and stopping the next narco trafficker.
Well, we'll watch it, and we'll watch if you get to that 60-vote threshold. Keep us updated, Senator.
I certainly will.
Great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Always a pleasure.